Black Friday sales are over, Game of the Year awards are coming up, so let's talk about video games we haven't played yet in our never-ending backlogs. Today is Monday, November 30th, 2015. This is the 1P versus 2P podcast. I'm Taylor Ray. With me, as always, is my brother Ryan Ray. Let's get started. But in lieu of our standard show format, let's talk about the ultimate first world problem for us gamers, dealing with our video game backlogs. And what that means is video games that we've bought, the past several months, maybe even years sometimes, that we really want to play, but we really haven't gotten a chance to play yet. I don't know about you, Ryan, but for me, it's a personal issue because as an adult, you start to get busy with work, life gets in the way. You really don't have time to sit down, every weekend and play a super long JRPG that's over 100 hours long and finish it quickly. And with games constantly coming out, it's really hard to keep up, right?
Yeah, it's funny. It's increasingly seeming like every game I want to play is increasingly going in the backlog. Like right now, I'm trying to finish stuff for our Game of the Year podcast in order to kind of make informed decisions. And I have some games that have really long playtimes ahead of me, and that's a really scary thing to face. But let's talk about the backlog in general. How many games deep would you say your backlog is, Taylor?
Well, I don't have this written out, but I do have my huge-ass gaming binder here. So I'm actually going to physically open it up. And I've got to tell you, if I had to estimate, this binder is full. It has to be over 200 discs in here. And it's everything between PS4, PS3, Xbox 360, Xbox One, Wii U games. So a bunch of discs in here. If I had to guesstimate, I'd have to say it's between 20 to 30 games long, at least, at the minimum. That's like and that's definitely like a soft estimate because I can tell you, even on generations before that, there are games that I've definitely wanted to play and just never got around to doing it. I own a lot of definitive collections, remasters, because these are games that I want to play on current consoles, and I just never got around to playing the originals, like Metro Redux. The Last of Us. I still haven't played The Last of Us. I have Last of Us Remastered in here. Obviously, it's a good problem to have. You have too many games. Like, how am I ever going to get to play them? But after a certain point, you really miss out on some really good stuff year after year.
Now, these are games you're hoping to finish, right? Because 20 to 30 to me sounds like a kind of a low number. I think that's actually a healthy way to describe it. I think if you were to describe the main difference between you and I as gamers, I think you're more of in the collector side. I can hear your binder there in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking through it now.
I try to buy games that I think I'm actually going to finish. But even then, I think my backlog is massive. Just on Steam alone, I have 332 games, a lot of them picked up on Steam sales. And of those, I've probably played about 70 or so. And, you can do the math there. That leaves a good portion of my Steam collection unplayed. Not to mention also the disc-based games that I also haven't touched, the games that routinely go free on PS Plus, on Xbox Games with Gold. It's just a lot of stuff to keep up with. And it's funny, I think we all are interested in playing the games of the zeitgeist people, games that people are playing at the moment that they're talking about. It seems like so many of them are coming out week after week after week that it's impossible to keep up with. We have to have jobs so we can pay to afford this hobby. It's just really, really crazy. I don't know how people keep up with this.
Yeah, I think at a certain point, as people grow up, if they've played games since they were kids, they've all of a sudden realized, I can begin to make money and afford the kind of games I want to play. And as soon as you start collecting the games that you want to play, there's an inverse curve there. The more money you have, the less time you get as you grow up. So we all have responsibilities, and it's really difficult, especially for us as gamers and podcasters. We want to keep up with what's coming out lately. We discuss that kind of thing a lot on our show. And especially with Game of the Year awards, I know I'm scrambling to come up with a list and games that I've heard about that are highly recommended, that I know I should be playing, and I've been buying all along. In fact, Black Friday, my wallet's just taken a huge hit because of it. But these kinds of things are important to me. I do want to pay attention to what the industry is focusing on, what people are enjoying lately. Otherwise, why should anyone care to listen to what we have to talk about?
So what would you say is probably the oldest game in your backlog that you're looking forward to play outside of discussing and thinking about on our show?
Man, that's really a hard question. Yeah, if I were to look through all my disc-based games, I could tell you, a handful of games that are even before last generation. If I had to think about like one on PC in particular, I'm a fan of RTS games, and one game that I just absolutely skipped was Warcraft 3. That game just comes to mind immediately because, I've enjoyed StarCraft 2 since then, other Blizzard games, and that just one stuck out in my mind because it spawned a whole MOBA genre just because of a mod from that game, and it's something that I just completely missed. I don't even own that game yet. I don't know if you can consider it officially on my backlog because I don't own it. Of course, I could find it for cheap nowadays, but that one definitely stands out for me. What about you?
For me, it's definitely going to have to be Quest 64. This is a game that at best could be described as a cult classic. It's a game that I really enjoyed when I was a kid, but I'd never finished. And it's a really long game. It's a third-person adventure RPG style game. It's really, really long. It's at least, I'd say, about 50 hours or so. First of all, finding that game was really, really difficult, and then I eventually did acquire it. It just seems like it's something that's always in the back of my mind, something I've always had in my craw, and I'm never going to probably finish it because I have so many other more recent RPGs that are worth experiencing that, I'm looking forward to a lot playing. The mechanics of Quest 64 are really dated, probably don't translate very well to people who, play twin stick controller games more recently. And that's on an N64, which is an old console at this point.
At what point do you consider skipping over and completely ignoring a game that's on your backlog? You may still own it and you may go back to it eventually someday, but it's just not on your priority list anymore.
Yeah, for me, it almost correlates with the price of the game as the value of the game drops after it stops becoming new and the sheen kind of comes off of it. We start to think about season passes and DLC and ways in which to keep the game fresh. For me, it's this weird thing of I'm probably not going to revisit a game if the value of it has gone down by at least like 60% or so. If you can pick it up on a Steam sale and let's say it's a $20 game and it's now $5, I might pick that up, but I'm picking that up knowing that I'm only going to play that game reasonably when it's a day when I feel like I'm not really in the mood for anything else. And I'm like, oh, sure, I bought this thing. Well, let's give it a shot. And then sometimes I really enjoy it. And sometimes it's just something I fart around in for 2 hours and don't really enjoy all that much.
So you're saying games that definitely go on sale on like Black Friday or Steam's seasonal sales, are they helping or hurting your backlog?
I think for me, they're definitely hurting my backlog. They're just dogpiling on top of it. I'm playing right now a game, for example, Disney Infinity 3.0 edition that I got on 2 separate sales because with that game, you have to buy the base package and on top of it, the figurines. I'm just now visiting it while we're thinking about our Game of the Year categories because I think it's an important game. I think it's a game that kids are playing. But honestly, if it was something that was full priced, I probably wouldn't be experiencing that at all. And because it was on sale, I thought about picking it up, and now I'm finally just getting around to it. I really didn't have any interest in playing that game beforehand, knowing what it was going in.
So I think what you're trying to say here is that there's definitely a lot of pressure to play these games, especially towards the end of the year, because you want to make up your lists of Game of the Year awards. And if it's something that's been covered in the news a lot, a lot of people, your friends have been posting it on Facebook and Twitter, really recommending it to you. You want to give it its due diligence, right? It's hard to take a step back and say, nah, I'll just put that off until next year, maybe. And then, of course, there you go. It's instantly in your backlog at that point, right?
I mean, for me, Destiny the Taken King was definitely a game that kind of was in my face. I thought I was done with Destiny. And then it came up again back in the news. It said, oh, finally, Destiny has returned. It's good again. And I totally felt the outside pressure of wanting to play that game. And then I did. And then I bought it. And then I had my time with it. And now I'm done with it again.
Yeah. Instant regret, right?
Right. Instant regret. It just seems like there are games that weave in and out of your life. And you have to really take a step back and think about what you'll have time to actually finish and enjoy. So I know that I have my taste and you have yours, Taylor's. What sort of games do you look for on a sale versus buying at full price? There are some games that you absolutely see and you're like, I'm on that game day one, and I'll be there. But otherwise, maybe I'll wait for the Game of the Year edition where all the DLC will come feature packed. What sorts of games do you think fall in that category for you?
For me personally, because our friends really get into Call of Duty every year, I definitely buy those on day one just so I can continue to play them with our close circle of friends. It's not because I'm like a huge fan of Call of Duty. I do enjoy playing them as multiplayer shooters, but they're not number one on my list. And I think the last time I really felt compelled to play that game daily was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. For me, that was probably the best of the entire series. And since then, I just haven't felt that urge. I just kind of play it maybe once a week if all our schedules really line up. So, yeah, that's the kind of game that I definitely play on day one. But other than that, it would have to be tried and true franchises of game series that I'm already a huge fan of. For example, Fallout, that's a big one. A lot of first party Mario games, definitely same situation. So it really, for me, it's hard to get into a new IP until I've seen the reviews from people that I trust. You look at reviews at Kotaku and Polygon and even sometimes Destructoid. I want to see what they think before I take the time to, drop $60 on a brand new game. But if it's a game that I see that it's a good review, but maybe I'm caught up with something else, I'll actually wait it out and wait for the game to get under $30, let's say, and sometimes even under $20. So especially if it's like a single player only game, I'll definitely wait until that drops down way in price several months after its release, because I don't have incentive to play it. But multiplayer games are a different story. You have a community that plays from day one, and then oftentimes that community just drops off after several months, and then you don't get good matchups. So to me, it's valuable to try to get in early for those kinds of games.
Yeah, for me, it's almost a hour to price value ratio. I've heard this batted around a lot. People think that if you're spending $60 on a game, the dollar to hour ratio is $1 per hour for everything you've enjoyed. Maybe if you enjoy the game, maybe that ratio is $2 an hour. And so if you're paying $60 for a game, that means you're planning on roughly spending anywhere from 30 to 60 hours playing that game. And for me, games that I'm going to be there on day one for are games that really fit that model. This is kind of a problematic equation for me because sometimes I spend $10 on a thing and I really enjoy it. And sometimes I spend $10 on a thing and I really don't, no matter what the hour count is. So it matters what those hours are filled with, right? Like if you're talking about a game like Fallout, that's a game you're going to spend $60 on, and easily, just trying to mainline the story quest, that's at least a 40-hour adventure there. If you try to do all the side quest stuff, forget about it. You're spending playing that game until you're old and gray. For me, I consider that a lot when I think about the time I spend with games. And sometimes that means I miss out on games. I know for sure this year I'm going to miss out on Splatoon because if it's a multiplayer only experience, I know that if it's a game like Splatoon that my friends won't be interested in playing, I don't. That's not going to be a great value for me because I don't have as much fun with those types of games if I know my friends aren't into it as much. Battlefront is another great example. I probably am not going to pay full price for that game if I don't know somebody else who's going to be playing it with me.
Yeah, well, I'm curious. Have you ever heard of howlongtobeat.com?
No, I haven't.
So basically, it's this crowdsourced site that I actually check up on quite frequently for new games that come out, because there is something to that price value relationship to me, that price to hour relationship. So yeah, it's basically, it gives you like a database of all these video games and how long it takes on average for people to beat. It's sort of people are manually submitting their times, and they break it down to say like, okay, what's the main storyline? What's main storyline plus side quests only? What's completionist playthrough? What's the DLC, hour total like? And it's a really good resource to me to see, even for my backlog, should I even play a game? Because if it's a game that I can beat really quickly, I might, power through it in one weekend. And I think it's a good resource because, of course, they're averages. You might take longer, it might be quicker for you, but it's a very helpful resource. And also, there's another site called howtobeatsteam.com, and it actually calculates based on how many games you have in your entire library, and it'll actually spit out how many hours it would take for you to beat all of those games. Again, it checks against that database, but it's kind of an interesting tool. So we'll put those links in the show notes. And if you're curious about these kinds of things, and if you're worried about your backlog and seeing how much time it would take to play through and finish some of these games, they're definitely sites that are worthwhile to check out.
I mean, those sounds like really, really great resources. But I think where I have to stop with that kind of equation and math in my head is games that I think are kind of a little more personal, a little more intimate. I would put this year's Undertale as probably one of those games. Undertale, I finished in about 6 hours. And those are games I've really enjoyed. But how do you put a price on that kind of personal experience? This is a kind of a thing that came up on Twitter right around the release of Everyone's Gone to the Rapture. A lot of people decry these games as like walking simulators, right? They're like 5-hour long games at most.
Right, they're art pieces.
Right, you don't really like shoot, or there aren't really like level up mechanics. There is an experience. You just kind of walk around and experience the world. And I really like those kinds of games sometimes. But I feel like people, when they don't spend that long of the time on a game and they feel like the math ratio is off, the value ratio is off, then they feel like those kinds of more intimate games aren't worth it to them.
I guess the bigger question is, do you think developers are paying attention to that kind of thing? And, are they taking that into account before even developing something?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole reason why achievements and trophies exist. Well, it's not the entire reason they exist, but if you look at any achievement list or any trophies list, and you can now see how many people complete a game, the percentage of players who started this game and then got this trophy, you'll see that a lot of the kind of end game achievements, the like complete this game or 100% this game, or I saw the final cutscene, it kind of really drops off after the first 2 or 3 story related achievements. And it's always interesting to me to see the percentage of players who actually complete all of the achievements, or at the very least see the campaign through on some games, right? Like, how many people do you know that actually play through a Call of Duty campaign? Most people I know who buy that game buy it for the multiplayer, so they're not interested in a single player story driven thing.
Yeah, I kind of like to see for PS4 the rarity system there, so you can see, if they're early trophies, something that you can achieve really early in the game, they'll be set as common, and then like platinum trophies that are very difficult to achieve, they'll be ultra rare. I like to see those with those percentages, but the Xbox infrastructure misses that. Those rarities, those percentages just aren't there, and I wish they implemented that a long time ago, because at one point I actually really, really paid attention to achievements, and sometimes I would even exclude games that I would play because I would look in advance, on a site and check to see which achievements could actually be done without sort of cheesing it. And to me, like, seeing an achievement that was just unattainable for myself, I just would completely not play the game because I was concerned about being a completionist. I'm no longer like that anymore. I don't even pay attention to trophies or achievements anymore. If I get them, it's great. If it's a game that I'm really invested in, that I've already played maybe, I don't know, something between 40 and 60 hours in, and if it's an attainable goal, I will go out and seek out the platinum trophy, but I don't do that for every single game anymore. What about you?
Yeah, for me, trophies and achievements really don't factor in anymore. Like you, I was also really invested in the achievement system back on the 360. And I would steer away from games that had multiplayer-based achievements because I knew that if it was a multiplayer game that I really enjoyed, but my friends weren't playing, I was never going to get that achievement naturally. And I think when you go down the rabbit hole of these achievement sites, where you have to kind of game the system in order to get certain achievements, I think you're in a real deep hole. And for me, that's kind of a dark place. And I don't want to be playing games exclusively to get the achievements. I play games for the fun of it, not for the trophy case that I'm building in my fake video game profile.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's interesting because sort of what I mentioned before is that, as these online communities for especially console shooters, for PC, they're always live, and it always seems like if servers are taken offline, someone's making their own and hosting private servers to play these games. But for console shooters, forget it. I mean, if you've played this like a game years after launch, I'll give you a good example of that, which would be like Shadowrun or Team Fortress 2 as part of the Orange Box. There's just zero people playing online. You can't even achieve some of these achievements anymore. So yeah, it's just like a huge disincentive. But for me, it doesn't affect my backlog anymore. I don't even bother looking at them anymore. But a lot of people do. People will arrange going online at the same time, partying up, just to sort of cheese a system like in multiplayer matches. If you need a certain amount of kills with, whatever weapon, they'll just sit there and let their partner do it and then switch off. Like, it's just, to me, that's not an achievement. That's just, exploiting like a really silly system.
Well, moving this conversation a little bit away from the trophies and achievements problem with backlogs, it seems like some games really seem backlog ready. They're either kind of released under the radar, most people won't play it at first glance, or they're platform exclusive before being released on other platforms. So a great example of this is probably Rise of the Tomb Raider. That's a platform exclusive for Xbox One right now. And then next year, it'll be available on PC and PS4. And I know for me, I'm going to wait until those other versions of that game get released, and then possibly the original Xbox One version will go down in price, and then I'll check it out. But again, we have games that come out with season passes, and people wait for all the DLC to come out and to play that. I know you're one of those kinds of people, Taylor. Do you think that affects your backlog?
Well, I rarely buy season passes out of the gate, because a lot of times, again, several months out, or sometimes even as short as weeks, they'll have a sale on individual DLC. And sometimes season passes, you're paying for things that you're paying for futures. You don't know what you're going to get. And to me, that's just a bad value proposition. If it's a Game of the Year edition where everything is packed onto a disc, to me, that is valuable, because let's say that DLC is ever taken offline, it's no longer available for purchase, then you have that DLC indefinitely. You can enjoy that content without having to worry about, subscriptions to Xbox Live or PSN. So to me, there's value in these Game of the Year re-releases. And I'll give you a good example of this. When Shadow of Mordor came out, and I played through it, and then I heard about the announcement with the Game of the Year edition that would include the DLC. I immediately traded it in so I could retain some of that value. Like, I actually got a decent enough money back when I traded it in, so I could later just grab the entire package in the Game of the Year edition.
Yeah, for me, it seems like a lot of these kinds of games, these Ultimate Editions, these HD re-releases, these Game of the Year editions that include all the DLC, sometimes it is a really good value proposition, and then sometimes it really isn't. I recently got Gears of War Ultimate Edition. This is a remastering of the original Gears of War, which I really did like. It was one of the reasons that I bought a 360 in the first place. And then the Ultimate Edition just really soured me on the whole thing. They didn't really do a whole great job of making those assets look a lot better. The multiplayer side of things still has the terrible lag problems that the original Gears of War had. That was a really terrible experience. And sometimes I get burned by that kind of thing. And I feel like a lot of publishers are going out there and re-releasing old content to be playable on new platforms. Think of like God of War 3 remastered, right? That's a PS4 game, but the original God of War 3 was a late PS3 title. And I think if you don't have the original platform that it came out on, these remasters are good news for you. But if you did play the originals, it's this question of whether or not you want to add the remaster as part of your backlog, or it's just nostalgia and you feel like as part of your collection, you spent so much time with this thing, you have to have the best version of it possible.
Oh, I think the first case that you mentioned, where if it's a game that you hadn't played before, I think it's worthwhile to go back and play the new remastered, up-res, whatever, definitive edition version. If you had played the game before, there's zero value personally to me. You're spending money for the same game that you may never ever go back to. So to me, it's not worth it. But let me ask you this: why do you think publishers insist on putting these games out? Do they actually do a study on forecasts on these kinds of games? Will people actually buy these games yet again?
Well, it's hard to say. I think it's goes on a case by case basis. But let's take, for example, Halo: The Master Chief Collection. Right, the Halo games go back to way back when you and I were in high school. And there's been a whole new generation of gamers who've come to the Halo games in between the releases of Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo 4. And Microsoft is obviously still interested in making Halo games. Master Chief is practically their platform mascot. And they're, 343 is going to continue to make Halo games. And then they had Halo 5 in their back pocket, and then they said, well, wait a minute, there's a whole group of people who don't know what Master Chief is, they don't know what Halo is, they don't know why people are excited about this series. We want them to really buy Halo 5. Let's make an easy to re-release thing in a massive collection, and people will go nuts for it, people will go back to the source material, and people will really start to understand why this is such a big deal. Like, I think the whole reason that Super Mario Maker exists, cynically, it's not just Nintendo saying, hey, we think Mario games are important. It's saying, hey, Mario is almost 30 years old now. There is a whole, 2 generations of people who enjoy our games, enjoy Nintendo, but don't really know what Mario Brothers 1, Mario Brothers 3 really played like. Let's expose them to that in a kind of new package and get them excited about this thing so that we can continue to make Mario games that people will play and enjoy.
So it's an effort really to stay relevant with their existing IPs. Is that what you mean?
Right. I mean, think about how many years Skylanders games have been coming out. That was reviving, the original Skylanders was an attempt to revive Spyro, a franchise that had 2 games on the PS1. And this is Activision going out and saying, well, we think kids really like toy figurines, and we really want to build a game off of a model like Madden and like Call of Duty, where we try to release something very similar year to year. And I think they've been very successful at it. We've had now 4 Skylanders games, and kids seem to be really jazzed for it. But if they stop making Skylanders games, they're going to fall off, and people will kind of move on to other things. And from a publisher standpoint, they don't want that.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the toys to life in Skylanders, because if you look at what Nintendo is trying to do with Amiibos, and it's interesting to see what new games are coming out that have Amiibo compatibility. And now you have incentive to say, well, I already own this Amiibo. I'm going to unlock bonus content in all these different kind of games. And how does that contribute to playing games on your backlog? Do you want to see that bonus content or not? And same thing with Skylanders. If you look at these toys from the original base set, you can play those across the newer versions as well. So they're not completely lost in time. There is some functionality that's not there. For example, in Disney Infinity, where you have different iterations like 2.0 and 3.0, and certain figures aren't available across certain games. And that's unfortunate to me. But for the discussion on a backlog, do you think the toys to life has really complicated things for these publishers?
Oh, for sure. I mean, on top of new and exciting additions of these same games, now we're adding a whole nother backlog. Now we're talking about a figurine backlog, right? Like, I have Amiibos, I have Infinity toys. I'm sure there's some other people who have Amiibos, Infinity toys, Lego Dimensions toys, and Skylanders. And it's just getting to be like too much. It almost feels like you have to pick one. Otherwise, your backlog is going to be uncontrollable. And on top of the backlog, you're going to have all this plastic sitting around your house, and we're going to have entire closets, entire safe rooms where it's all these plastic figurines of my favorite characters looking at me saying, "Why didn't you touch me? I was interested in being, I was interested in enjoying this content in this game, but." It's almost kind of making a fetish out of this collection thing that gamers really kind of fall into very easily with backlogs.
Yeah, I think Rock Band and Guitar Hero really suffered this fate when talking about peripherals and accessories. These aren't toys to life, but they took up a lot of room in people's gaming spaces. And now you have Rock Band 4, which I'm sure is underselling because people don't want to rebuy these instruments. I think that music game genre sort of hit a bubble. And I fear that these toys to life will hit a bubble at some point. People will say, enough of the shortages. I can't get the characters, the figurines that I want. They're too expensive. I think the gravy train for Nintendo especially, I mean, Amiibo sales have just gone through the roof. It's been a successful release for them. But I think at some point it's going to grow old for sure. And these games that have Amiibo functionality baked into them, I honestly don't think a lot of people are using them. They want to keep these Amiibos as collector's items versus, in-game unlocks. They don't want to open these packages to play them, right?
Or people will go the other way with it and they'll start collecting all these things and they'll get really invested in all the DLC and all the Amiibo functionality. And then they'll ask, I really like this thing. Can you please keep making games with this kind of functionality from it? And then we get games like Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, which use the new Animal Crossing figures, but it doesn't really seem to add much to the experience by having the Amiibo.
And how many other Animal Crossing games are to come out after that include Amiibo support, right? Like, it's not going to be a very frequent thing.
Right. I know the whole reason that I was interested in Rock Band 4 was because I spent a lot of money on DLC on older Rock Band games, and I was interested in continuing to have that moving forward. And the only way to be able to do that was to invest in Rock Band 4. So I think there is some kind of like mindset where you get into where you have so much of a thing and you want to continue enjoying that experience, and then so therefore you're married to that content for the length of its lifetime, or however long people will keep making games under that brand.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you said about console exclusives. Now you get fanboys, communities that rally around one console, one platform versus another. You get the PC master race. You get PlayStation fanboys. They're all the worst. To me, you and me, Ryan, we like to experience everything under the sun. I think we're platform agnostic. And that also contributes to part of the problem. If you have exclusives on a particular platform, then if you don't own the other one, you can't enjoy it ever. So it's a hard thing to balance, and it's a good problem to have. We have too many games to enjoy. Too many worthwhile experiences that people talk about. It's really the ultimate first world problem, really, right?
Right. Let's end this on a positive note, since we've been kind of criticizing backlogs and kind of having a larger discussion about this. What is the one game in your backlog that you think you will finish sometime in the near distant future?
You're going to laugh at me when I say this. It's Red Dead Redemption. I still, to this date, have never played that game, and I know it's on people's game of the generation lists. Like, it just was such a huge experience for them, even bigger than Grand Theft Auto 4 on 360 and PS3 and PC. That's a game that I have always eyed on my backlog and said, I really need to get to that. For a while, it actually was Mass Effect 2 and 3. I immediately played Mass Effect and loved it. And I just, for whatever reason, college and life got in the way. Yeah, and I didn't get to Mass Effect 2 and 3 when everyone was talking about it. People were talking about all the spoilers and the endings to those games. Like, I just wasn't involved in that zeitgeist, and I made a concerted effort not to pay attention to that news. But for one that I have not played and that I need to get to soon is Red Dead Redemption. So crossing my fingers for a new, definitive edition to come out. What about you, Ryan?
I think for me, kind of in the background is the game that's always going to be in my backlog are the Dark Souls games. I have enjoyed Dark Souls 2, and Bloodborne quite a bit, but I've never finished one of those games. I've gotten almost to the end, or I've gotten stuck on a boss, and I just hit my head against the wall, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. I have to walk away from this. But then I always come back to those games. Those are games that I think are very compelling for me, and they're very difficult. They test my skills, and they're games that I really enjoy playing. I really enjoy their worlds. I really enjoy their character building. I really enjoy experimenting with the different kinds of character classes that you can build in those games, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to the day I actually put my foot down and sit down and finish one of those games. Because, man, it's really difficult with all these other games in my backlog that I think I can actually complete to have Dark Souls, a game I've never finished, be in my crosshairs.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, let's wrap this up. That's it. If you liked our show, please, if you listen to us regularly, if you subscribe, please let us know. Review us on iTunes and Stitcher. It would be a huge help to us.
All of our episodes can also be heard on our site, which is 1pvs2p.com. You can also subscribe through RSS by clicking on our site's sidebar buttons.
Yeah, and all of the links that we talked about earlier in this show, they're going to be posted at the link in the show notes. And make sure to like us on Facebook, facebook.com/1pvs2p. Also, you can follow us on Twitter. We're very active there, at 1pvs2p_podcast. We want to thank Phonetic Hero for the use of his songs for our show, part of the compilation project Chiptunes Equals Win.
Stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of Game of the Year coverage in the coming weeks, and we hope you'll be excited and listen to those shows. Thanks again.